All right, good morning. We are back to Chapter 5, The Flow of Food, an Introduction. So here we're going to start talking about the flow of food, the path that the food takes through the operation. All right, definitely it will come through the back door. We'll order it. It will come to the back door, to the dock area, where we will purchase it, and we'll check it in, looking for any cuts in flour, any kind of holes, anything like that. We're going to be looking for all of that. And then, so we'll check it in, put it away, and then you're looking for time temperature abuse, you're looking for cross-contamination. And then once we have it on our shelves and we have it stored properly, then the kitchens will come and get it. So at that point, it goes into the other people's hands, into the prep cook's hands and the chef's hands, okay? So one, we want to prevent, we want to keep it safe, and we want to prevent cross-contamination, and we want to prevent time temperature abuse. So time temperature abuse would be, let's say I'm prepping for 1,000 people, and I'm pulling out chicken breasts, and I need to season them and sear them. So I'm trimming them up, I'm getting off the fat, and for 1,000 people, I pull out 20 cases and I have them sitting on the table. And as they're sitting on the table, they're sitting there for hours and hours and hours. You know, that's time temperature abuse. That here, you know what, you pull out a case or 2 cases and you leave the rest in the cooler until you need it again, so that you're not losing that temperature. Because once it sits at a certain temperature for so long, it's between 70 and 125 is where the bacteria will just really rapidly start to grow. So you got to be careful with that. You want to keep it cold. If it needs to stay cold, it needs to stay cold. If it needs to stay hot, it needs to stay hot. So, you know, it's just looking at that. All right, so cross-contamination, you want to separate your equipment, especially with ready-to-eat foods. Cross-contamination, here's what I do. So let's say I'm prepping chicken. I've got my party for 1,000 people I just told you about, and I'm prepping the chicken. Am I going to prep the salad on the same table? No. Am I going to prep it close to that where I can get chicken juice on my lettuce? No. I'm going to have it separate. Sometimes it will be on the other side of the kitchen. It all depends. But I'm not going to have it right next to each other, because if that happens, I promise you this, chicken juice will get on the lettuce and somebody will get sick. So you got to be really, really careful with that. All right, so always you want to clean and sanitize your work surfaces. You want to get used to doing that. So when you come into the kitchen, and we'll teach you this when you get in, is you'll come in and you'll take the table. It looks perfectly clean, right? You're still going to clean it. You're going to sanitize it, and then you'll start setting up your station. Because you don't know what's happened in between of the last cleaning. Somebody could have come in and had raw beef, and they set, you know, a case on the table, and some blood dropped on it, and they just took a paper towel and wiped it off. And there's still contaminant right there, right? There's still bacteria there. So you need to come in and wash and sanitize and then set your station up. So a lot of people don't do that. That's probably one of the worst things, I'll tell you, that people don't do in our industry, that you need to do. So you need to really kind of start looking at those things. Raw and ready to eat food, prepping at different times. You want to just make sure that you're not prepping it next to each other. I'm not going to be making a cookie tray next to cleaning my pork, okay? I'm just not going to have that. So I'm going to have an area that's my ready-to-eat foods, that my fruit, my vegetables, my baked goods, those things are in a separate area where nothing can contaminate them. So you always want to be really, really careful and look at your processes and look and see where things are. I'm constantly managing my cooks, my students, to, hey, move. You can't have these 2 things next to each other. One of you need to move. It's just like, it's a constant. You got to just keep track of those things. So time temperature control. So again, our temperature danger zone is from 41 to 135. Okay, so you have 41 or below is what you want to keep things cold at, or 135 and above is when you're cooking, right? So let's say I am cooking fish. I'm going to cook it to 145 degrees. If I'm going to hold it in a hot box, so let's say I have 4,000 people, I have fish, I'm going to hold it in a hot box. I want it to stay above 135 degrees so that the bacteria doesn't start to start forming. Okay, so now I want to hold it at 135 degrees or higher, keeping that hot. Now, what I need you to understand is when you start getting the where they grow in between that. So if you're looking at your thermometer, you're looking at 70 to 125. So all of a sudden, my fish comes down to, let's say 110, and it sits in that area for hours. And my hot box, let's say my hot box got unplugged, and now my temperature has gone to 110, and 110, the bacteria is just popping away. It's rapidly growing. All right, and that's why you'll see people, they'll come and they'll check the temperatures every hour. If it's sitting in a hot box for a long period of time, just to make sure that it's at the right temperature. Because if it sits there for too long, let's say I have potato salad, we're at a picnic. I know I've seen it more times than I know what to do with. Potato salad at a picnic. It's outside. It's in this heat, this Georgia heat. And you have 4 hours, and it goes above 41 degrees. Some people will put it in an ice bowl. They'll have ice and then put it on top of it, right, to keep it cold. But, you're with friends. They don't care. They don't know. And it just sits there. And that potato salad goes to 75 degrees, 80 degrees. The bacteria is just, popping away and exploding and growing. And guess what? That's how people get sick. Okay, so it's becoming aware of these temperatures, and you got to stay out of these wrong temperatures, because guess what? That's where people start to get sick. And you'll start to see there's processes in place that, especially with big hotels, they have HACCP plans. We'll talk about it later, where you're checking temperatures throughout the process. You're checking it when it comes in the door. You're checking it when it hits the kitchen, when it's cooked, when it's done. You're checking these temperatures to see where is the kink in the process of what's wrong and how it's going to grow, and how people get sick. So it's just kind of learning that and knowing that. Okay. So cooking, reheating, if I'm heating something again, let's say I have a lasagna. I talked about lasagna before. I have a lasagna. I made it yesterday. We ate it, but we still have half left. I need to cook it to 165 degrees. I got to cook it so that it kills any bacteria. I got to cook it up to that temperature. I can't just cook it to 120. Guess what? People get sick. All right, so it's just kind of knowing those things. So you need to know that temperature. You need to know that 70 to 125 is where the bacteria will start to rapidly grow. Okay, so that is a danger zone. Danger. All right, avoid temperature abuse. Monitor. You're going to monitor your temperatures. You're going to use correct thermometers. I'm going to talk about thermometers today. You're going to regularly record what the temperatures are. You'll see that we record the cooler temperatures on a daily basis to make sure that our temperature is staying at 40 degrees or lower. If it's all of a sudden at 45 degrees and staying there, now my food is in the temperature danger zone. And so guess what? Bacteria starts to grow. That's how people get sick. What do? I throw it away. I've had, over a weekend, you come in from a bad storm. We just had a bad storm the other night. And you come in the next day into your restaurant or hotel, whatever it is, and you come in and guess what? Your cooler's down. And that cooler, it says it's at 55 degrees. Now, did it happen within the last hour? Did it happen last night? You don't know. So when in doubt, don't, right? All of it goes away. Everything gets thrown away. I've thrown away more things than I know what to do with. Why? To be safe than sorry. Because people get sick. And all of a sudden, people get sick. What happens? You close. So we don't want that. So you always want to take corrective action. Let's say you start to see your cooler is going up. If I'm monitoring my temperatures, now I'm watching when did it happen. So definitely I can see when it happens, and I can make sure, hey, this is hot. Yesterday it was fine. Okay, let's get it out of here. If I know that it's been a little bit of time and I'm kind of aware that, it's the food, I can touch it, it's not cold anymore, I throw it away. But if it's still ice cold, I can check the temperature. Oh, it's at 40 degrees. I'm doing good. I'm fine. If it's at 42 degrees, I'm still going to keep it, 45. Okay. But after that, I'm not, So it's just really looking at that. Your bimetallic stemmed thermometer. So when you guys get your knife kits, you're going to get your thermometers. We're going to show you how to calibrate them to make sure that your thermometer is working properly. Usually you can calibrate them in two different ways. You can use boiling water. Water boils at 212. So you just put it in there and you get it to 212, and all of a sudden, I like doing the ice water method where ice goes to 32 degrees. So it's ice and water, and then you put it in there and you turn it and you look and see, does it go down to 32? Let's say it goes down to 36. I turn it to get to 32. I'm good. And now my thermometer is calibrated. And I'm ready to use. Do I do it? I do it every day. Anytime that I need it, I use it. And I calibrate it because I'll put it in my arm and it sits there. And what happens? I hit more things. I have more bruises. I know what to do with. And, it gets busted up. So it loses the calibration. So you always constantly monitor, and you gotta, calibrate. Thermocouplettes. Here you've got different probes that you can use for sensing areas. So here you've got the interchangeable probe, immersion probe, where you can just stick it into a liquid. All right, a surface probe where you can it's kind of like you're shooting a gun, and it's infrared, and it will tell you what the surface area is of that temperature. Let's say I want to see if my griddle is reaching the temperature I need it to be. Penetration probe, there you got another probe, and then the air probe. So air probe is another gun that I can shoot into a cooler and see what the temperature is, or I can shoot it into an oven and see what the temperature is. So you're constantly looking at the different temperatures that you have. The infrared thermometer here used to measure the surface temperature of food and equipment. Hold as close to the food as possible, remove from the thermometer, and follow the guidelines. It'll tell you what temperature it is. Then you have the maximum registered thermometer, which will hit the highest temperature. Usually I'm going to use that. Like I have it's a probe that I can put in oil because oil you're going to get to 375, 400 degrees. I use that same for if I'm cooking kind of candy or fudge. It's going to get to 350 degrees. So you need a different thermometer for that. Something that will go higher. Usually you'll see a candy thermometer that you'll use or something like that. You have a time temperature indicator. Now these I've seen with when they come in from the truck. So Cisco will bring our food, okay? So let's say we have a case of frozen shrimp. We want to make sure that it stayed frozen, right? So they have these thermometers that they use. They attach it to the package. And what it does is if it goes under a set temperature, it will change it will change, the dots will change the color, and you will know that it did not stay at the temperature it should. So that's one way of Cisco to monitor how their trucks are doing, how their food is doing. The other is that I get to monitor and see this to make sure that my food is staying at the temperature it should be. So I'm not getting food that's been hot, that was frozen, and then it thawed out, and then it froze again. So it's making sure that it's not having that time temperature abuse. Calibration, I talked about, you can use the ice water or the boiling. And again, 212 is your boiling. When I use the thermometer, when I use the ice, it's the water, and it's 32 degrees. When using thermometers, make sure you wash, rinse, and sanitize them. People like to just wash them and wipe them off and put them in. Remember, they get uncalibrated more times, so you're constantly bumping them, so make sure that you're using them and calibrating them always. When using the thermometers, make sure that they're accurate. That's why I always check mine, especially, the last thing I want to do is have a ribeye that's a 20-pound cut of meat, right? It's a huge cut of meat. I know the last thing I want to do is overcook it. Usually I'll cook it to 110 degrees to get it to a medium rare, which is 130, 135. So if I'm going to cook that, I want to make sure that it's not going over 110 degrees. So if I don't calibrate my thermometer and I stick it into my beef and let's say my thermometer is 10 degrees higher than what it should be, then guess what? It's going to be, now it's going to be at 145, 150, where my beef is overcooked. Same thing with chicken. Chicken, I need to cook it to 165 degrees. If my thermometer is not calibrated correctly, guess what? I'm going to have raw chicken. So you got to make sure that these things are calibrated. So anytime that I use my thermometers, I'm always using them. I'm always using it to check me. You know what? I've gotten to a point where I can feel something and I can tell you, yes, it's cooked. No, it's not. A steak, I can tell you if it's medium rare, medium well, whatever it is. But again, you know what? If you're new, guess what? You're not going to be able to feel it and touch it. So you know what? You got to use a thermometer. Thermometers, they double check you. I'll never forget. We had a lunch for, it's probably about 200 people, and we had fried chicken on it. And I'll never forget, the server comes in and is like, your chicken was raw. I'm like, no, it's not. I checked at least 3/4 of the pieces with my thermometer, sticking it in to make sure that I was at 165 degrees. And she was like, this lady, she says it's raw, and it had a little blood on the bone, which happens. Anybody knows that. And I looked at her, I said, yeah, just give her some different chicken, it's fine, because I already checked myself. But if I hadn't checked myself, it would have been a different story. It would have been, oh, really? I didn't know it was raw. No, I already checked myself. I knew what it was. So here's the thing. You always got to manage yourself to make sure that because people are going to try and tell you that you didn't. And 90% of the time, a lot of people don't do that. So I always make sure that I'm checked, that, I know what I need to know so that nobody else is going to tell me. I rather check it and go, I need to put it back in the oven for a few minutes than to serve raw chicken. So, because all of a sudden, if you have one person eating raw chicken, guess what? I got to take the whole thing off the line. It's just crazy. So you don't want to have that happen. Best advice I'll ever give you is learn from your mistakes, learn from other people's mistakes. That's the biggest thing that I know. It's like I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And when I know what I don't know, then I'm good. So I know what I need to learn. Most people don't like that. I hope everything's going well so far. I hope you guys are doing, really doing the test your knowledge. We've got a quiz tomorrow. That's going to be Tuesday. You're probably going to get this on Tuesday, unless you read ahead. Some of you guys are already ahead of the game. Again, if you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask. I am at campus. Like right now, I'm not at campus because our air conditioner died over the storm, and I'm waiting for them to get here. But once they get here, I'll be back on campus. So if you guys ever need anything, always know I am there, that you can come and show up, and, you can use the computer lab if you need to or whatever. So just know I'm here, whatever you need. All right. I hope things are going well. If you have questions, please email me. And I promise you I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. Because I know being off campus, I know being online is different for people. Okay. So anything you need, let me know. All right. We'll be going into chapter 6.